we haven't done an update on the state of retro game collecting in about 3-4 years at least.
Really?
It's been a while.
Has it been that
since
long?
we did that? Yes.
All right.
That was one of our most popular early videos early on in 2013-14.
Yeah, I do recall that.
So here we are, Ian. It's 2019.
Mm-hmm.
We had the past few years, we had stuff like NES Classic come out, Super Nintendo Classic. We have had a bunch of new systems to keep them alive. The new analog systems, Nintendo, the AVS, FPGA systems. We have a lot of successful Kickstarters now, and fundraising things for like the Polymega to play old games, and like the Atari VCS system was successfully funded on here. Ways to at least to play retro games. May not necessarily be collecting wholesale, but I think it's related a bit. You can't totally separate retro game collecting from the people that play them. They feed into each other a little bit. But in 2019, we have officially, I think, reached sort of maximum exposure and interest so that we have outside interest now monetizing the hobby. And we spoke about it the last topic with Go Collect, a comic book collecting and pricing site buying Nintendo Age to beef up and build up a new website, I guess Video Game Collect. You have WADA partnering with Heritage Auctions and people that from the comic book world getting into buying high-priced rare games like NWCs that show up there. They bought the $100,000 sealed original Super Mario Brothers cart for exposure, obviously. And then you have a lot of people now transferring, not a lot, but people that notice that comic prices, maybe video game prices will beef up the same way, and they're buying sealed games, they're getting them graded, and they're going to try and sell them and flip them to a larger extent. So I think there's going to be a shift here. There's going to be a schism that's already happening between two types of game collectors. The people that were the older preservation side, bought them before they were valuable or just getting in price. And now the people that notice that it's now a hot thing or was a hot thing, getting in to try to beef it up to the next level to say that, okay, there will be a lot of $100,000 video games. There will be, routinely auctions going up where games will sell for tens of thousands of dollars. And I think we're fast approaching that now. And on the tail side, though, I think the general interest in game collecting itself, collecting the cartridges, has been waning. And I'll get your comment on that soon. But from what I looked at for prices on NES, Super Nintendo, N64, they peaked in 2016. I've always said that NES game prices peaked in 2016, and they absolutely have. And the way you look at that is you look at the common games that are popular, the games that people are most likely to buy, to play, to hold on to. Games like Contra and DuckTales are not near where they were a few years ago. A lot of the Super Nintendo games are the same way. They've fallen off. And more importantly, the games that had shot up in value, Little Samson, Dinosaur Peak, they stopped. They didn't keep up the same path. They shot up, they plateaued. People got priced out of the market, and I think it was a shell game with people passing games back and forth between each other. And I think that's where we're at. I don't think it's a bubble that's burst, but I think there's been a correction, and you're probably going to talk about shifting interest as well. But it's interesting that more interesting than the prices softening on some of this is I think the people have had their thirst quenched, I think, a bit by these NES classics, Super Nintendo classics, where there's been overexposure almost to some of these different systems where, all right, that's enough for me. I don't need to buy the physical game or seek it out. This is enough.
Sure. So there are a couple of things I've noticed that I'd say that slightly different. Not necessarily disagreeing with you, but different things that I've just come across. So one, yes, interest is shifting. I've said it always, and it'll keep being the same. What was new to us or doesn't feel retro to us definitely feels retro to kids who are growing up. Mm-hmm. They get the same sort of feeling exactly that we do, and we may not want to admit it, but these people growing up, their Jack and Daxter or whatever was their Super Mario. It's what they remember. It's where they get the warm fuzzies. It's the games they played with their parents. And Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 1, oddly enough, have always been popular, and they don't seem to be, losing popularity. But Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Genesis has actually ticked up a little bit lately. But Nintendo and Super Nintendo, in terms of collecting, in terms of that being the only thing people ever come into the store for, it's happening a lot less. In terms of prices, I think in a physical retail store, I haven't noticed as big of a change as you might notice when you look at like constant online auctions and stuff. But whereas people will still pay for a popular game that they want to own, no one's looking for those hard to find titles anymore that aren't fun to play. I've had a copy of Supercars sitting in the case at Luna, I think, for $15, and
That's an uncommon game, very uncommon.
very uncommon game. No one wants it. No one cares. Actually, I think someone finally did buy it, but it sat there for like 2 or 3 months.
In the past, I would have been gone in a week and a half.
Right. That's just not stuff people are looking for anymore. We're back to the point where people just want to buy the stuff they remember. So we started at, it starts with, oh, these are fun. I want to play some of these again. Then people get hardcore about it, and now we're back to the same 50 to 100 games selling. The other thing I noticed is I think a lot of people got all that energy out with the NES stuff. And I do think that will carry on to future collecting generations, especially as the total game counts grow and things like that. I knew everyone and their mother who was coming into the store when this stuff started to get hot, 2006, 2007. They all wanted complete sets. They all wanted full NES sets. That was the goal. Now, I think a lot of people have learned, and you've mentioned this a little bit when writing the book, there aren't as many people on, say, the Super Nintendo or the Genesis that are looking for rare stuff just because it's rare. There were lots of shitty rare games on the NES, but everyone wanted them still because they were keys to their collection.
Sure.
People don't want that stuff on the Super Nintendo now.
No.
There's a lot of underground games that have gone up in price. Look at something like Run Saber, but then there's tons of shit that's like impossible to find that no one's paying anything for.
No.
You brought it up, Camel Tree, or it was called On the Ball here, is a game that I never see anymore, but you can get it for like $15.
Maybe not anymore, because you mentioned. But no, in writing the Super Nintendo book, I'm not astonished, but just generally surprised about, first of all, how many uncommon games there are. There's as many uncommon games as common games on the set. When I'm going through, I'm looking at all these games, I'm like, I've never seen this game before. I've never seen this game before. Never seen this game before. And then when I looked up some of the prices, it didn't correlate the same way an uncommon game price would correlate with an NES game.
Yeah,
it wasn't close.
We've been trained that uncommon means more money, and then very uncommon means more money.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Not on the Super Nintendo.
In the Super Nintendo, people learned, and at this point, it's still a lot of people buying what they would have interest in playing.
So what drives a lot of these prices are completionist collectors like me. There's no reason for Little Samson to cost $900. There's no reason for Dinosaur Pete to cost that much money unless you wanted a complete set. There's no reason for Statements to cost that much money unless you wanted a complete set.
But now no one wants. It seems like no one really. There's far less people going for complete
But that hasn't carried over to Super,
right?
To N64, even to PlayStation. What I always said about those consoles.
The 64 does have a few really crappy, expensive games.
But overall,
true. I mean, yeah, the worst ones. Stunt Race, Bowling,
Sculptor's Cut,
Worms Armageddon. Worms Armageddon's actually fun.
Yeah. So what I always said about PlayStation collectors and the future collectors is that they won't care about filling rooms. They'll just say, I want this set of stuff. I want all the Atlas games. I want all of these sort of games. And I think that's how it's played out. So the problem with that for people that, not problem, but the issue there is that you're now getting to where I think eventually all these sets will return back to is that the vast majority of the game's value will just plummet, and you'll be stuck with either a few weird games worth a lot of money and all the common games that people like and popular ones, and you'll have all the uncommon filler that people won't care about. And I think you're starting to see that now.
You'll still have your very expensive, very rare titles, but we're getting, I think, to the point where it's going to be based on rarity and gameplay. So you could have an expensive, somewhat expensive common title because people want it. Mm-hmm. You can have a bunch of inexpensive uncommons or even very uncommons, and then you're going to have the few that meet the criteria of both wanted and very hard to find. And then those will stay at that
which is kind of like how comic books have become.
Yeah.
So comic books...
Well, exactly.
Those Silver Age comics, an Amazing Spider-Man was a Fantastic Four. That Fantastic Four number 45, you can find it just as much as the 48. The problem is the 48 has the first appearance of Galactus and Silver Surfer, so it's worth like 10 times the amount as that 45 is worth. Even though there's the same amount of both of them. Mm-hmm. I think that's what's going to happen with video games. I really do. And on top of that, though, I think we'll get to the death of physical media. We're going to see how that affects collecting probably 10 years from now, more so than right now. But you have people that obviously are selling collections. It's not... When I first said this like 2 years ago, people were like, oh, Pat's being an alarmist. Am I?
I don't think it's accelerating as quickly as you think, but it's happening.
But now we're talking about it more and more. We just talked about Dane selling a huge collection off, everything. We know people from online that have sold stuff off, mutual friends and acquaintances that have sold stuff off. I'm going to sell part of my collection because I'm getting older. I don't have room for a lot of it. And I don't want to deal with it when I'm 60. And I think it's a combination of factors where this is happening. But going back to like these prices, though, I'm looking at Mario Kart 64. According to price charting, it peaked December 2016 at $47. Now it's at $33, and it had just dipped to $25. And I think overall there is a less general interest in acquiring these. Looking at the convention scene, there's a lot less retro gaming conventions that are popping up or trying to pop up now versus 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I'd say was probably the peak where you had a bunch try for a year or two, and they disappeared.
Yeah, I was gonna say like 3 years ago seemed like the year where there was just
too many,
a billion. I think I did 5, and I could have done like 8, and I was like,
and some of them have died because of there was a bubble and they burst. There's too many in one area. I think in Texas there was at 1 year there was like 5 of them in 1 year, and only a couple have survived. But some have just shifted away to be general gaming conventions because they realize that the kids coming up, the teenagers, they don't necessarily want to buy this shit.
Well,
they want to experience it to an extent, but they don't need to purchase the items. And so from that perspective, it's not going to carry on to the next generation, the physical ownership.
Sure.
It just won't. No one's going to be more interested in these NES games than me, after me. You know why? Because I'm the one that spent 20 years acquiring them. It's a self-evident sort of fact about it. So with that said, we have things like the sealed game collecting. People buying the prototypes. They want these one-of-a-kind things. They want to slab these games. They want to sell them. Though that's an interesting offshoot of retro game collecting, but to me it's something different. That's totally different. That's people that are comic book collectors, toy collectors that want to invest in a new... They see this as a hot new field to get into, to pump it up to what their comic collection is, their graded comic collections. They think they can do the same. It's just a money play. It's a total money play.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with preservation. It has nothing to do with widening the knowledge of this stuff. That's what has been established by people that have been collecting for the past 25 years. They're the ones that built the databases and found out about the weird variants and shit that existed. Now people say, oh my God, look what you have this field that's laid out. Let's go in and let's fucking strip mine it. That's the way I see it. But the issue to me there is that unlike comics, where you can grade anything, with these guys, they're only getting to sealed grading. There's not a huge amount of sealed games out there that you could do for a lot of these games, I think, to maintain the interest. Does that make sense? Over time, like... There's a reason why we even talk about why complete in-box Game Boy collecting never took off. There wasn't enough of them to sustain enough collectors to even build up an interest level.
Yeah, it's too far.
There's just none of them.
To this day, it's still hard to get any good read on a value of a complete in-box Game Boy game. You might... I mean, there have been ones, and I can't think of them off the top of my head, but there have been ones that have come in where I'm like, okay, well... I'm sure I can find at least something on this on eBay. No completed transactions for a complete copy of it fucking ever.
Find that Universal Soldier. I don't know how I got mine on a deal. Find that boxed WCW. You think, oh, WCW, there's no boxed copies of it.
Yeah.
It's not some weird fucking... It was a WCW game. People didn't keep the boxes. So I'm not saying that's going to happen where I think what these people getting into and these aren't video game collectors. This is a total offshoot. Mostly getting into this. They're going to discover that this isn't comic books, that any old fucking sealed game that they got graded doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be worth gold in the future, and that they're going to trade them like hot potatoes between each other. That's what I think is what's going to happen, because those collectors are the top, 0.1% of video game collectors. Not a lot of people have that money to blow, or I should probably say to invest on these games. I'm not interested in it, and a lot of people that collect video games aren't interested in sealed games. They're not going to glom onto it. So I think it's always going to exist, but it's just going to be this separate sort of group that's going to be an outlier. It's never going to take off, I think, the way they think it's going to, the way comic books. It's always like, oh, well, if it did it for comic books, it's going to happen with this. It happened for some toys, it's going to happen with this. You can't keep going down that road just because it happened with another group. It's not always the same. It just isn't. It just isn't. But getting back to where we are with stuff that you sell, the stuff I collect, I think at this point, most people, for the 90s systems, most people have the shit they want. If that makes sense.
Yes.
We have the stuff we want. We've had, if you want to say 2006 as the sort of a point where it shot up, we've had 12 years, 13 years to buy this shit. Even before it really shot up in value the past, 2012, 13, where it really started shooting up more. So at this point, what's left? Is there enough new people to get into this? No. There's not enough new kids that want to buy my Master System collection. There's not going to be a lot of 20-year-olds out there that want to buy my Turbo collection or my Genesis games or my M82 demo unit. There just isn't.
Well, I mean, you'll have more luck with Genesis, Nintendo, and Super Nintendo, but yeah, the
I'm talking about overall, though.
The specifically tiny collections, I see those dropping at some point. A Master System was hot for a minute because everyone who finished their NES collection went for it, but does anyone talk about it? Does anyone play it? Does anyone do anything with it?
I mean, I got an awesome bitmap books Master System book, but
I like the Master System.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, a lot of this collection was just fed by the desire to buy more.
Yes.
The Master System's got good stuff on it, but it's not. It's not something that people even that 2 years where people were collecting it, it didn't give it any face time. Honestly, it didn't really bring in any new fans of the Master System, and I can see other stuff like this. All it did was serve to pump up the prices for a little bit, and then everyone walked away.
The Fantastic Four, here's an analog to comics. The Fantastic Four was like Marvel's most popular comic book for like 25 years. No one talks about Fantastic Four now. Interest can die off. Even if something was cool and popular, you give it enough time, people don't talk about it anymore. Because it's just a natural way. It's just the way things work.
Yeah.
That makes me say about Fantastic Four, but it's going to come back with the movie. It's going to get its day. Sorry. So that's all I'm going to say about this is that prices have retracted on systems. Yes, probably, Ian. There's some systems that'll probably go up with the timing. Has Saturn gone up?
Saturn is insanely high. Saturn is...
But that's like Turbo, though. There's not a lot of games. Not a quantity of games.
Saturn's fucking through the roof. And the timing on it is about right, too.
I think we always talk about stuff like TurboGrafx, where it's like those always probably remain somewhat valuable because there isn't many of you can't find them.
Saturn, Dreamcast, Turbo. There's always going to be some inherent value there, I think, because of... I'm
looking up Snatcher.
Reality.
Snatcher stayed the same price the past few years, about...
Snatcher's one of those games that rarely wavers.
$400. It peaked. You know where it peaked? It peaked May 2018 at $455. Now it's at $400.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's what I would assume.
Let me look up like Bonk's Adventure, a quote unquote common TurboGrafx game. That to me would be interesting to see what that has done. Yeah, so that is not at the highest it's been. That's gone up and down a little bit. That's at $33. It looks like that's also where it was. It was at 36 in 2016. It was at 35 in 2017. It dipped back around. So that's been about the same it's been for the past 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
They haven't keep coming up. They've plateaued. They've reached sort of a mark and they've plateaued. I just think it's interesting.
I've seen a lot of smaller stuff where like a price will go up and then it will just plateau. Sapphire for years was 500 on average, and that
From
may still be
Sapphire.
it. But I recently saw a couple of them sell for like I think it was like 750 and then 850. So, but I think regardless of that, it's not the change in price I want to bring up. It's the fact that with smaller niche collections, the prices can get really expensive, but they don't tend to
Well,
fly up.
you also get to the part where people that know the value of it won't let it go for a deal. They'll hold on to it for years and years.
Sure.
Not going to happen with a game like a Sapphire or Magical Chase, where it's like, yeah, there might be 3 people interested only in it, so I know that you have to buy it for me, so I'm not going to give you even a $500 discount. I want $5,000.
Oh, there are games that used to sit on eBay. Like there was a Koryun up on eBay that sat there, I think, at $450 for at least 2 years, 3 years, and I think I realized it sold a couple months ago for $400, meaning that it took 3 years for them to drop it $50, and then it sold. So yeah, they can hold on.
A lot of ins, a lot of outs. So I think we definitely seen, I think, the peak in terms of, I think, craze to acquire this stuff. There's I think obviously some people are selling off their stuff, and that affects prices. Not saying that it's totally affected these softening prices. There's not enough of it. For the rare stuff, you would see it if 6 or 7 people sold all at once. But I expect the plateau is going to continue. I expect more of the common stuff to gradually lessen and lessen. But like I said, even the uncommon stuff, I was shocked. Well, with the Super Nintendo prices, I was like, this is interesting to me. Very interesting. So Ian, 5 years from now, where do you think we're going to be? Do you think we're going to be at a people just buying PS3 stuff or just PS2 stuff and just focusing on that?
No, I think we'll always have people who are buying for the other systems. But like I said, I think it's going to go from I want a Nintendo and everything to I want a Nintendo, Mario 3,
like 5 games.
Zelda, Kirby, and I'm done.
Will they even want an original NES anymore?
Honestly, we don't sell many original NESs anymore. Ever since the HD Retrons came out, Retron HDs. I mean, snobs don't like them, but they're totally serviceable for what they are. For the average person who's playing these games, they sell like crazy. So I'm still selling tons of those. But honestly, no, I don't think anyone wants original NESs anymore. And the thing is, I don't want to sell original NESs anymore.
They're a pain in the ass.
They're a fucking pain in the ass. Like I'll have a guy come back 3 times. It's not working. Yes, it is. You're seeing it right here. Well, it's not working at home. I don't know what to tell you, man. But there's too many variables in, with an NES. It's old. What part of it's dirty? Is your cartridge dirty? So, they're a pain in the ass to sell, and people don't want them anymore because everyone's got an HD TV, and only people who have like CRTs really want an original NES at this point.
Real quick, Earthbound check, because we always use Earthbound as a sort of point. So Earthbound, remember when it was over $200 for a while, around $200 like 5 years ago? Mm-hmm. It dipped down. It looks like it dipped down to $130 last year, January last year. Now it came back up to about 180, 164.
Yeah, I think we sell it for I think we have it for 160.
Remember it was at 250 for a bit, or 220? Remember that for a hot minute?
We never had it over 200 because people kept saying that. People kept saying that, but when I look, I wouldn't see those selling for over.
I think it was like Amazon sales or some people were telling me.
It was always at like 200 for a long, long time, and then it dropped to 180, and I know it dropped lower, and now it came back up.
So, all right, so it's not woe is me, but there's definitely been a softening. There's been a retraction. There's been people getting out for sure because people get older. That's just the way it works here. And we'll see where it shifts a few years from now. But the fervor has definitely been done. Gone are the days where you have 5 or 6 different vendors at the swap meet with their own little game store. That's fucking done, over. That will probably never return.